Okay, the next one is antitrust. Before I do antitrust, let me just do cost curves, because cost curves will figure into antitrust. Okay, so what's going on with cost curves? In the first chapter, or the second chapter of every textbook you'll ever see, what they'll do is give you the correct view of, namely the Austrian view, the correct view of cost. Cost is the next best opportunity foregone. The fact that you're here, sitting here, listening to me babble on about Austrian economics, what is the cost to you? What is the real cost? The real cost to you is what you could have been doing otherwise had you not been here. I don't know what that cost is. You probably don't know what that cost is. You didn't even think about it because you were thinking about indifference curves or praxeology. You weren't thinking of what the alternative or opportunity costs of being here were for you, or not only this lecture, but the whole week. This lecture, you could have slept later, you could have been riding a bicycle, you could have gone for a hike, you could have been swimming, you could have been reading. Who knows what you could have been doing? Whatever it is that you could have been doing, the next best thing, that's the cost. That's the alternative or opportunity cost. And nobody knows what anyone else's costs are, and we don't even know our own costs because we very rarely think about that. Okay, so that's chapter 1 or chapter 2 of virtually every mainstream microeconomics text. Intro, intermediate, advanced, that's cost. And that's Austrian. But then in chapter 6, or wherever they get into cost curves, they start drawing things like this. This is the average cost curve. Now look, this is pornographic. Because they say that the best point is to be there. Now come on. You know what that looks like. Now, where the hell do we get this average cost curve from? I mean, average cost means that if you produce this much, quantity 10, the price will be 5 or something like that. This is objective costs. Now, somehow they switch from opportunity costs or alternative costs, which are subjective, and nobody knows, but it's a theoretical thing, a very important theoretical construct. And all of a sudden, we got this crap. Where'd we get that from? And then they have the audacity to say that if we have perfect competition, the demand curve faced by the firm will be there, and will be at the bottom point of the average cost curve. Whereas if, God forbid, we have imperfect competition, we'll have a demand curve that slopes down, and now we won't be at the average cost, at the bottom point of the average cost curve. And this is bad, therefore we have to have perfect competition, which means an infinite number, and they call us unrealistic, an infinite number of firms, and everybody's producing a homogeneous product, and there's no competition, and there's no profit, and then they just go on and on with all sorts of wonderful things about perfect competition, and they say, aha, in the real world there's no perfect competition, and whenever there's no perfect competition, the antitrust people can get you. I mean, you know, that's just crazy. I have to tell you my antitrust joke. It's a series of 2 jokes, and I once told this joke in front of a whole bunch of lawyers and economists who make a lot of money in antitrust. A colleague of mine, former roommate of mine, Ben Klein, who's a pretty famous neoclassical economist, he was in Money Macro, and he was switching to antitrust and IO, and I asked him why. He said, there's no money in money. Which means you can't make much money in studying money, but there's plenty of money in antitrust. You know, the defense, the plaintiffs, there's plenty of money in there. So he switched to this, and I was giving a lecture to people like that who love antitrust. And it was a 2-part joke. And the first part was, there were 3 prisoners in the Soviet Union, and as prisoners do, you people know, you're a bunch of jailbirds, you swap stories as to why you're in jail. So the first guy says, in the Soviet Union, well, I got to work late, and they accused me of cheating the state out of my labor services. And the other guy says, I got to work early, and they accused me of brown-nosing. And the third guy said, I got to work every day exactly on time, and they accused me of owning a Western wristwatch. And I got a big laugh out of the audience. And then the second part, there were 3 guys in jail in the US due to antitrust violations. And the first guy said, well, I was in jail because I charged higher prices than everyone else, and they accused me of profiteering. And the second guy said, well, I got in jail because I charged lower prices, and they accused me of predatory price cutting. And the third guy said, well, I got to jail because I colluded, and I charged the same price as everyone else. Of course, it's hard to see how he could charge the same price as everyone else, given that this guy's charging high and that guy's charging low, but you have to work with me. I mean, it's just a joke. But the point is, none of them laughed because they all realized that this showed that antitrust is dead from the neck up. Because, I mean, look, the law of murder is a legitimate law. Because if you murder, you go to jail. If you don't murder, you don't. The law of rape is a legitimate law. If you don't rape, you don't go to jail. If you do, you do. But in antitrust, no matter what you do, you charge a higher or lower or the same price, you're guilty. So, and yet, the so-called free enterprise Chicago school, now let me draw you my antitrust thing. Can I do this? No, I better get a fresh sheet of paper. The way they do it, they have, here's the average cost curve, here's the marginal cost curve, here's some sort of demand curve, and here's a marginal revenue curve, the average revenue or demand, here's quantity, there's price. This is the ideal place, this I'll call C for competition. There's where the perfectly competitive firm will be. But the monopolist, dirty rat, will be where marginal cost hits marginal revenue. And here's the price of the monopolist, and here's the quantity of the monopolist, here's the... Is this clear enough to see? Well, those of you that are used to this will know that I'm doing it, and those of you that have never seen this before, I don't know what to say. Here's the price of the competition, and what they say, the problem is that here is M for monopolist, and the indictment of the monopolist is higher price, lower quantity, profits are earned because there's a difference between the demand curve and the average cost curve, so this is profits. But the real thing that they hate is this thing called dead weight loss. This triangle here, call that K, so it's KMC is the dead weight loss, and they just hate that with a purple passion. And what they say is that they should be producing at QC, but they're only producing at QM, they're withholding. They're engaging in restrictive practices of some sort, and they've got all sorts of laws about this. But this is just interpersonal comparison of utility. This is just cardinal utility. What they're saying is that we value the product, this area here. Let me get another pen. We, the consumers, value this product, that area. Is that clear? Maybe I'll go like that, that area. And this isn't really clear. Let me try again. It got too busy. Okay, so here's marginal cost, average cost, demand, marginal revenue, and this triangle here is the dead weight loss triangle. And what they're saying is we should be producing QC, we're only producing QM, and therefore there's a misallocation of resources. Now think of it in terms of Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods engages in, I don't know, 8 tournaments a year. And what they're saying is he really should engage in 12 tournaments a year, because we value the extra 4 tournaments more than he values the disutility of the extra 4 tournaments. Now, come on. I had a full head of hair before I saw this, and look at me now. I mean, this is nonsense. This is nonsense on stilts. This is crazy. This is cultish, religious. I don't mean to diminish religion. Cultish. I mean, this is horrible stuff. And yet the entire edifice of, no, I shouldn't say, I was going to say the entire edifice of antitrust is based on this, but it's not. What it's really based on is what Murray Rothbard said. It's just the Morgan people were getting the Rockefeller trusts, and the Rockefeller people were getting the Morgan trusts, and then later on economists came up with this nonsense in order to justify it. So you can see one reason that the mainstream doesn't like Austrians, because there'd be no antitrust if Austrian insights were implemented. Although I shouldn't say that, because Austrians, we do believe in the difference between normative and positive. And I think someone was saying, Tom Woods the other night, that cheating rascal, was saying that you could have a Nazi or a socialist Austrian who just understood economics but hated humanity and wanted to screw us up. And he'd be a good Austrian economist, but he'd be an immoral person. So I shouldn't make the normative positive fallacy here. But if you implement this sort of if you don't implement this sort of a thing, a lot of economists wouldn't have jobs. If you got rid of the Fed, a lot of economists wouldn't have jobs. Now, I don't say that it's an implication of Austrian economics, but work with me here on the normative positive. I mean, what Austrian economics says is that the Fed has thus and such effects, and those effects aren't very good. And what we're saying here is that this can't be justified in technical economics. And if that was implemented, the normative part, many economists would lose their jobs. And that's one reason that they don't much like us, because the implications of a lot of Austrian economics is for fewer economics professorships.